Hello and welcome back. We're here with our very special guest, Aishigo,
I
and Aishigo. I said it right, and I messed it up. So I'm happy to have you here. You're calling in from Spain, originally from Turkey. We love the diversity. We love the diverse perspectives that are coming into these discussions. And now you're going to tell us about something that is very important to keep the industry and keep the hype to a minimum, rethinking AI benchmarks, embracing diversity and depth in evaluation. I mean, how can we really believe or trust the words of marketing channels and people that have commercial interest in these AI tools? We cannot. Not not at face value. So I'm happy that you're going to be giving us a primer on this, and very much forward looking to learning from you.
Thank you. And thanks for this opportunity. It's great to be here. And yeah, let's open the space. And in the beginning, let me say that I don't have the answers for all. So it will be really a lot contemplative session. But first, let me start with introducing myself. I am Ayşegül. You can call me Aish. And my work has been dedicated to really trying to find out systems which can bring joy to humanity. And in that journey, I wear many hats: innovation consultant, time banker, community facilitant, mother, storyteller, data scientist has been some of the hats that I was wearing. Last 6 months, I was working with human intelligence as a research fellow. And human intelligence, by the way, is a NGO founded by Dr. Ruman Choudhury, who was the ex AI ethics lead at Twitter before Elon Musk bought it. And what the NGO tries to do is try to create community of practitioners of AI evaluators. And last 6 months, I was digging a lot to understand what is going on. I was doing a landscape analysis in AI evaluations and trying to understand what are the methods that companies are using. The main methods right now used are red teaming, bias bounties, model testing, field testing, and benchmarks. And today we will dive into benchmarks, and especially benchmark in generative AI. So we will try to understand what is it, and we will check some examples of them and some challenges with benchmarking in generative AI. And finally, as I have said, I will just open a contemplative place to ask some provocative questions. So benchmarking in generative AI, to understand it, we can use the analogy of giving tests to students. So you are a teacher, you have students in the class, and you are giving the same test, which are set of questions to your students. In this analogy, students are the large language models. The same test is benchmarking. And the grade that the students are getting is actually performance score of the large language models. So by this way, the models or the students know their growths and weaknesses, how they can grow and their weaknesses. And it's working more or less the same way for the benchmarks as well. And let's check what tests we are giving. So when new large language models are launched, generally they are launched with their model cards. So this way we know which evaluation methods these models are using. So from these model cards, we can also know which benchmarks they are using. If you are checking on the right, this is a list of benchmarks has been announced in the last model cards of the frontier models. And we are seeing that generally they are doing tests in general understanding, knowledge reasoning, visual math reasoning, document understanding. So let's dive even more to understand what are these tests, how they can understand general reasoning or science diagrams or coding proficiency. So here I will explain you these specific benchmarks, 4 of them, but also I will also explain a bit the challenge that Anthropic announced last year in a blog post, that they said they tried to implement these benchmarks and what was the challenge they have seen on the way. So first one is measuring massive multitask language understanding, MMLU. It is one of the most used benchmark. It has 16,000 multiple questions, and these questions are from 57 academic subjects, including math, law, philosophy and medicine. And by July 2024, 100 million downloads had happened. And the reason why it was so famous is actually with one performance score, model owners could see their place in analyzing how good they are doing in 57 academic tasks, right? But Anthropic said that they needed proofreading, both questions and answers. And also, as it was so famous, it was so easy also to find the questions in the internet. So the models were already trained with this data. It's kind of cheating, seeing the questions before. This is also a phenomenon that we are seeing in the space, actually, benchmark engineering. Sometimes model developers are using the questions to train their models. So Anthropic announced this. And bias benchmark for QA, BBQ, is another one. It is used to model test the models for biases and stereotypes. Again, it has around 58,000 questions. And Anthropic said it was not that easy to understand your place according to score, because it was from -1 to 1, the score that you were getting at the end. And also 0 was meaning that there were no bias. They got a lot of zeros, so they were very happy. But finally, they found out that there are some bugs in the benchmarking. And actually, these are, as I have said, this has some problems of benchmark engineering. In order to cope with this, there are some third-party benchmarks. So there are benchmarks which the model owners, model developers do not see the questions. One of them is Beyond the Imitation Game benchmark, Big Bench, and it's a collaborative one. Actually, 450 authors collaborated on this, and it has like around 204 tasks. And according to Anthropic, it was really hard to implement, and they spent a lot of time, and finally they decided not to use. And another important one is Helm, the one of Stanford's Center for Research of Foundation Models. And this is more from top down, right? Like Stanford is preparing the questions, model owners do not see this, and it has API integration. So the integration was very smooth. However, Anthropic's challenge was, as it is a voluntary effort, it took like 3-4 months to see the evaluation results. And also the coordination was not that straightforward. Actually, while I was preparing this presentation last week, there was a new paper called Better Bench. What they did is they analyzed the most known 24 benchmarks, and they gave some scores to each benchmark and overall rating as well. And then there was an article in MIT Technology Review saying that the way we measure progress in AI is terrible. So explaining a bit what we were talking in the last slide, you can definitely have a look both to the paper and to the article. So let's check what are those things happening in the field, like what people are working in, which kind of benchmarks, new benchmarks. For example, Epoch AI is working for a frontier math benchmark. They try to create very hard math problems for PhD level kind of questions. In the same way, Scale AI and Center for AI Safety is working for the humanities last exam. This is how they call it. And actually, you can also submit a question. And they say PhD level questions in different fields to really make it hard to be solved by the large language models. On the other hand, there's Simple Bench. They say where everyday human reasoning still surpasses frontier models. You can see the leaderboard below, and human baseline score is still up than the large language models. And these are not PhD level questions. These are more everyday questions and more human reasoning or tricky kind of questions that you can also try the questions for yourself. So actually what we are seeing is quite interesting. Definitely the AI evaluation field, and especially benchmarking in generative AI, is still not a science. There are not standards, there are not metrics. We are not so sure what to measure, and especially when we are talking a lot about knowing is measuring, and we really don't know what to measure. And this is the actual situation right now. And I want to open up a space with some provocative questions. And again, I want to emphasize that I don't have the answer. I'm still asking some questions, some deep questions, and opening our heart and to humbly understand that maybe our truths are not the only ones is also something that we can do in this time. So that's why I have prepared some provocative questions for you. First, I want to start with the Alan Turing important paper where he asked about if can machines think. So in 1950, when he wrote this important paper and he asked this question, if machines can think, he answered with a test which we call right now Turing test, and he said, you know what, we really don't need to understand how the intelligence works. We can call it something mechanic, something like donkey work, and I can give the same task to both human and computer, and I can just analyze the end result. And if the human evaluator, without seeing who did what, cannot understand the end result, then I can say that the machines can think. So the provocative question here. Oops, I lost you for a second. I hope you are seeing me.
Yep. No, you're still good. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So the provocative question number one that I want to ask is, can we call AI intelligent without knowing what intelligence is and just trusting the output? And if we say so, how can we measure intelligence accurately without first understanding what intelligence truly is? I think is the first question that we really need to ask ourselves with benchmarking in generative AI field. And the second question, okay, we say that AI is intelligent. We don't know what intelligence is, but it is a scientific research. We cannot understand it, but we can say AI is intelligent. And my next question then is it safe to use these models, which we consider intelligence, in various real life situations where we are giving them power of decision? And I will bring you to a journey in 1960s where Paul Ekman, the American psychologist and scientist, professor, made a research on facial expression. In the last talk, Amina talked about the facial recognition. This is not the same. This is affect recognition model, where Paul Ekman said that through facial expression, I can understand human emotions. And there was not enough scientific research on it. However, military, security, and hiring companies began to use it. Imagine that you are making an interview, and in the interview, your facial expression is labeling your emotion, and maybe you are not continuing the interview process. This kind of examples from the effect recognition model. Then there were a lot of critiques, and many companies stopped it after the investigation, more investigation, when scientists said that emotion field is much more complex than that. But some companies are still using it. With EU AI Act, it will be impossible to use it in European Union. It is not permitted. And actually, there are some safety benchmarks in the field, which is, again, not science. We still don't know how to measure the safety of these models. However, the question, maybe good question to ask right now, is what could be the minimum viable safety benchmarks we can design to evaluate these models before their widespread use in our real everyday life would be the next one. And now I will bring you a journey to Asia. In 1920, Soviet Russia began to implement a lot of change in both social and economic areas, in the rural areas like Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. And a Soviet scientist wanted to study the change in cognitive change. And they made a lot of investigation, and the findings were quite interesting. Those people who didn't meet with modernity, like collective farms, schools, nothing, that they were really living in rural areas, they had a lot of lived experience. However, for them, it was really hard to do abstract thinking. You know, these very typical tests that are done, try to group shapes and colors. They were not able to do that. Or even like try to categorize, map, and watch together under a context. It was really hard for them. However, they were great in problems like Ebbinghaus solution that you see in the slide. If I ask you, which of these orange circles are bigger, most probably you will say the one in the right. And the reason is actually because you are living in a modern society, And those people who were living in the rural areas, they were able to say correctly that both oranges are the same. So here, the question I would say is, if we are thinking that, if we are accepting with this research that our ability to categorize and classification is not the only reality, but it is emphasized after modernity, how our ancestors would design artificial intelligence, what functions it would have, and what benchmarks would have some role in this will be the next one. And let's continue. I want to touch something about collaboration and competition field, because benchmarks are very interesting. They are not serving just as an evaluative tool, but they become like a symbol of fierce competition. In the slide, you are seeing the Hugging Face leaderboard, where we are just announcing which is the leader model. And we are just comparing according to the result of performance scores of different benchmarks. Sometimes I am asking, like, generative AI benchmarks are stuck in the prisoner dilemma, and I guess you all know prisoner dilemma somehow. It is the game theory experiment thought. There are two prisoners, and independently they need to choose one of the options. They are not talking to each other. In isolation, they choose to speak, which is the fact, or to keep in silence, which is to collaborate. And if they have three choices, if they both speak, so if they both defect, they get high sentence. If one speak, one keep in silence, the one who keep in silence gets high sentence, and the other one is getting light sentence. And if they both keep their silence, so collaborate, they would get both of them light sentence. So the research actually shows us that in isolation, when the human beings do not speak, their rationality is not working really well for the collective welfare. So they chose both, they defeat the fact, so they both speak and they both get the moderate sentence. However, there is a variation of prisoner's dilemma, which is tit for tat. It says, if there is time involvement, and if you give the second chance to human beings, they really do interesting decisions. And what they chose, actually, they first chose to collaborate. And the second round, they say, I will do what my peer did in the first round. If my peer collaborated, I will collaborate. If defected, I will defect. So we are seeing that actually, if we really invest on trust, communication, and collaboration, our decisions can be much more better for collective welfare. So the question I want to bring you about benchmarkings is, how can we create new benchmarks with cooperation in its core to help us build long-term trust and sustainability? And the last analogy that I want to share with you, last provocative question, it is not just about benchmarks, but it is a bit more about the AI field, because everything is at the end related. And I want to give you an analogy of marathon here, because Alan Turing, he was not just a pioneer computer scientist and pioneer of artificial intelligence, but he was also a professional marathon. So inspired by him, and also marathon is a great symbol for really seeing the human ability to imagine and to put objectives to us, and how we can accomplish those in individual and collective level. So if we are thinking benchmarks as marathons, my question would be, what are the objectives that we are putting ourselves in the AI field and in this age? And also, maybe most importantly, for these objectives, what is the value system that we choose to operate? And for this, I want to bring you to the history of AI, because in 1955, when it was the first time John McCarthy used the artificial intelligence as a name, he was not talking about the deep learning or neural networking. He was talking about symbolic AI, which was about understanding the human reasoning and writing the rules of those reasoning. And this is also called the good old-fashioned AI. And this was the most famous one till 80s. And then in 2012, something happened when Geoffrey Hinton with his team really made a milestone. There is this important data set, which is called ImageNet. And in a challenge, Jeffrey Hinton's team could label that ImageNet data set with almost 11% more accuracy compared to last year. And it was like a big milestone. And how he did that was with deep learning and neural networking, which are statistical models. And how did this could happen was using a lot of data, because we don't understand how these models are really working. There is a lot of explainability problem, and these models are black boxes. But using a lot of data made this possible. And there's a lot of discussion about this in the field. Jeffrey Hinton believes that if we feed more data to the systems, we can reach to human intelligence. And there are a lot of critics about this as well. For example, Gary Marcus, who is a cognitive scientist, he says that intelligence is something much more complex than that. However, scaling issue is already here. We are talking and discussing a lot about scaling, and which reminds our values of capitalism. We are continuously extracting. We are saying, okay, if we need more data, doesn't matter, copyright, privacy, more data, just go for it. Or human workers are labeling it, doesn't matter, low wage, just label that. Or we need more water, more energy, doesn't matter, use the environment's resources. So we really know this value space from capitalism. And the last question that I want to ask is, what are the objectives that we want to accomplish in AI age? And most importantly, what is the value system that we want to operate in? And lastly, I'm leaving you with a quote from the philosopher Bayo Akomalofe. And because there are two approaches here. One is questioning deeper, and the other is measuring the surface. And Bayo is saying, reduction of intelligence to cognitive capacities obscures the vast, troubling, and tragically poetic ways that the world cosmos is intelligent. And I think with this quote, maybe our minds can be even more confused, and I'm leaving you with that. So thank you. And if there are any questions.
I have to say that I love the beginning of the presentation. I am human. I love being human. I love being me, and ending with this expansiveness of the cosmos. There is infinite intelligence around us. We just are measuring it with the wrong kind of yardstick. So I really appreciate that expansive view.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there was a previous presentation a while back in July where someone said, why are we comparing LLMs and these things, these mathematical models, to human intelligence? Or how can we even begin to do that, as you said, if we cannot understand our own intelligence through chemistry, through biology, through physics? There's so many different factors that picking one way to measure seems sort of wrong and static. Why not compare it to animals, or why not compare it to organisms that are easier to measure? Maybe that's one way to start. But what have you seen with your research is the overwhelming trend? Is it people are looking for the brute force of size? Is it speed? Is it the misuse word of reasoning, which this doesn't reason, but it actually just predicts things statistically better? What do you see?
You mean like why we are doing this research, or can you just repeat the question? Sorry for that.
Yeah, what are some of the trends? What are some of the movements in the development of these newer models, and what is the focus? Like, where's the money going?
So yeah, I think, and also like I have this game of that I am playing with life, that whatever happens is happening for a reason. So I am really watching what is going on with a lot of wonder, like why is this happening? Because I think that thing that John McCarthy in 1955 defined these as artificial intelligence, and they were a peer of friends and a group of friends, and it was not the only one, but it was chosen because it was also more sexy, more cool, no? But I think it really brings a lot of questions and a lot of because it is intelligence is something so packed, so it is bringing a lot of issues that we just cannot discuss what is AI, but a lot of things are coming, like is reasoning, sensing, consciousness, all things that we know so less. And then we are trying to measure those in scientific field. Almost West and East are kind of coming together. And I think, again, the next thing is 2012, when the thing between symbolic AI and statistical models, just the rules begin to change. I think the main issue is scaling. And this discussion of like, okay, if we will use more data, then we will reach to human intelligence. It's also an assumption. But right now, Jeffrey Hinton got a Nobel. So he's one of the person who is supporting this idea. And we are doing everything with this scale idea. And as I have said, like, it's scaling. We need to be fast. We need to be competitive. We need to really ruin things on the way. This is the trend right now. And it could be another way in like 2025. Maybe we will see much more smaller models. However, the dominant narrative, which is supported from the big companies, is not this way, I will say.
There's a bit of an untangling that also needs to be done, I feel, from my perspective, that people say AI and immediately they think generative AI, or they conflate the terms interchangeably, and that doesn't help the situation that before generative AI, there were graph neural networks, machine learning, computer vision models, large language or language models. There were all these different flavors of technologies that have held their own benchmarking efforts as well. So it's interesting how marketing and all these mass media has shifted the perspective around what is the area of focus, as you say, right? Like what are we measuring? What is the functionality?
Yeah, and I think it's really important to understand how we are evaluating these models, both like large language models, or for example, ImageNet is in itself, it's a benchmark, both dataset benchmark and model benchmark. And it was used for computer vision models before deep learning, before large language models. But I think to understand that right now in the field, in AI evaluation field, there is no standard. There is no metric. This is not happening as a science yet. So when the companies are saying, yeah, we did great in the results of benchmark, are we really talking about with one performance score we are understanding that the model is well, or if the model will respond that PhD questions, what does that really mean? So, and also there are good efforts that I didn't have time to mention, but ML Commons just announced an AI safety benchmark last week, that they are working as a collaborative. Many companies are collaborating to create this AI safety benchmark. There are things are also happening. However, we are really lacking a lot of scientific ways to do that still. And I think it is really important that we understand that right now we are unable to evaluate both algorithms or large language models, that our ways are not enough. So maybe we should
Calm down.
Calm down a bit.
And you said it is a black box. I mean, you cannot on one side you cannot know for sure what has been used to train and build a model, what is represented in that model, what is the resulting model that comes out from that trained data, and then with the tests themselves, like what is the metrics, or what are the factors that are important, and how can you be sanitized testing the same thing across all these models? What do you think would be the path forward to build a more equitable or scientific approach for this AI benchmarking?
So like this, as I have said, these kind of papers are really important. The one Better Bench, that they have analyzed 24 of them, and they have already give overall rating and some possible ways of improving them. I think these efforts are really important, at least to say, look, these methods are not perfect. And their ML Commons latest model was also appearing there as one of the biggest score one. Mm-hmm. And really continue, and maybe we are seeing that more collaborative effort is working there. And we are also seeing in the model cars, they are not using a lot of safety benchmarks. The frontier models, they are using more general task or math benchmark kind of things. Definitely, they should use much more safety benchmarks for checks and announce them as well in the model cars.
Who should be enforcing that? Government, regulatory compliance?
Right now in EU AI Act, we are hearing about benchmarks as well, and in UK AI Safety Institute using their own benchmarks to. It's also in their repertoire of AI evaluation, so they're already referencing the benchmarks. So it is one of the most used method of AI evaluation, I would say.
Excellent. Well, I certainly learned a lot, and there's a lot of food for thought. We cannot trust everything that's being done, but we're making a careful effort to improve upon that measurement and that testing. So at least we're going somewhere, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to have a brief intermission, and then we'll be back in about 10 minutes. So stay tuned for the next one.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.